That was about 3 something on it. Back Monday. Go from there. Hi-yo. Get a Chromebook. Wait, actually, you're so Hi-yo, come on in. Our lady papers out. You get a Chromebook.
I don't even.
I'll explain to you all the things. Mia, how you doing? Yes. Yeah. Do you need to change seats based on your crutches? Yeah. I'll take your seat. He's leaving. He's leaving. Yeah, I'll explain. I'll explain.
Oh, is that
Like, so what time are you leaving? Like our bathroom? No.
I want to know what happened in your first block.
I assure you, you will never know what happened in my first block. Because I will not tell you. Wait, what happened?
I don't
Miss Ray got a
know.
Forrest Gump on her shirt. Oh! My Miss Ray have a Forrest Gump on her shirt? You don't like what's in the smiley face. We can go to something happens. Come on in. Maybe like 20 minutes at a time.
It's gotta be.
I got a story about these three.
Okay, yeah, I know your story. It's funny, actually.
I'm kind of good with these. Come on in. You see, I already got your pages laid out for a reason.
How's it going?
Came to the club about 50 little
Nice
times.
in here. So glad. Me too. How rude it is if my day looks like that. Oh, sorry.
We having a party today?
No, y'all look at this.
All right, you get a Chromebook.
What are we turning in? I'll be there. What day?
Tuesday, Thursday.
I'll make one of them. Where? Yeah.
We got a game. And now we're in 30 minutes. We got a game.
Hey, Mr. Johnson.
Hey, their game of police is
No, no, no.
Alright, come on in, take a seat.
And a cake.
I've invited some chaos by doing a dance. Hey, Garrett. Hey.
Hey, Mrs. Watson.
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay, and then.
When's our test?
Yes.
No, for real. Okay.
Hey.
No, I
Did. I responded. Alright. So check it out. Welcome to Monday. Feel the energy. Up front, this is Miss Young. She is me. I'm supposed to be leaving right now. I took a half day because I have to go take a test in Jessup. And it's like a proctored test inside of a test room. It's for my degree, so that I can keep being a teacher. So I gotta go take my own test. What I am gonna do, What I am gonna do is blast through today's class so that you've heard it from me. Now let me explain everything that's in your hands. So Miss Young, she's gonna be me when I leave. Mr. Taylor, he and I have talked about the class, so we're on the same page. Like if you need vocab help, we're on the same page. Here's how today's gonna flow. I am gonna go fast. It is not gonna be, hey, can you go back? I'm still writing. I'm gonna go fast so that you've heard it from me. But you can, as soon as I leave, you can go to Google Classroom. I've already posted the slides. And anything that I went too fast on, you pull it up on your own Chromebook, okay? So no excuses for he went too fast. You're gonna see it on Google Chromebook.
Google Chromebook.
Google Classroom. When we get to the end of the class, you're going to see that, the end of the notes rather, I have posted 3 articles that elaborate on our topics of the day. You get to choose one, okay? It's a choice. Take it from the menu of items to make a choice. Choose your article, and it's just kind of a read and reflect kind of a thing. Can't get it wrong unless you don't do it. So read, reflect, summarize facts, and tell me how it's still relevant in 2022. Chris, you asked a good question. This is not one of the articles. This is additional. Okay, this is additional. I'm going to go so fast today that we will have still time, right? So I've given you enough to occupy your brains. This is a read and respond. Welcome to an honors class. Okay, you get to do a little extra. So that is up front as fast as I could answer, as fast as I could explain a couple of things. Now I do want to say, well, I'll do the weekend report, right? Yesterday's special day in life of my family. There it is. I don't know if you can really tell, but there is a different color on my chest. Some of you came, some of you sent notes. I feel the appreciation. Thank you. I will say that I had the most epic 9-year-old birthday cake ever, and it looked like that, right? Mr. McGuire's wife is an artiste. Mrs. McGuire made all those cakes. Obviously, the middle one was very epic, and it's kind of like my 9-year-old cake of my dreams. It's what I didn't have at my 4th grade birthday party. However, we did have a fair amount of leftovers, and the small cakes, we had those left over. So I'm going to invite the chaos by walking out of here. I'm going to invite the chaos and let y'all divvy up the slices of cake inside of here, okay? There's enough mama bears in this room that you can slice and plate and fork it.
Savannah.
I believe in you.
Savannah the dryer.
That is only after I have blitzed through this.
Hey, he's in charge.
No, and I want to give a specific thank you to Gage. Gage came and used his photography skills, his state runner-up photography skills at the ceremony as well. So thank you to Gage for that. And it was a big weekend report, right? It was a big for a couple others in the room as well. Ladies. So tell us what you did and tell us where you're going next.
They're going to California!
We're going to Cali, baby! Hey, you bunch of Okies. That's funny. You gotta get it, right? Westwood migration. You bunch of Okies. Well, tell me what your discipline is. Tell me like what you did. Let's listen to Savannah. I have a feeling that she did the best.
Our event was called Chapter Display, and so we did community service, and we basically did a poster on the trunk or treat we had here, and it was really good.
Okay. Is that where you used the astronaut costume?
Yes.
Okay, you still have that?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Good talk.
Jacob was the astronaut, and
Okay.
me and imitate with the two little aliens, and we placed gold, which is the highest, bronze, silver, gold, and then first in our divisions.
Nationals, California, when will that be?
June 29th through July 3rd.
Okay, so you're gonna be fundraising up until then?
Pretty
You're
much.
gonna bring around cookie dough and laundry detergent and t-shirts.
And sheets.
Okay.
You're doing cupcakes
Hey,
again.
Ray, good
Okay.
job.
All the things. I will buy all items one time. And then I got a story about the twins and Garrett as well. Should I tell it?
Yeah.
So there I was, turning back into my neighborhood, right at the golf course, and I see a truck coming at me. And I did not see the driver. I did not know it was a couple of high school miscreants. But from this truck, there's a boat inside of it. Boat is too large for truck bed, for starters. And this truck goes boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden, there's a cooler flying out of the truck at me. I'm embellishing a little bit, but I told you I would. So this cooler hits the road, and it goes into like 4 pieces. And I gave it a little honk because I really assume it's a responsible adult who just hadn't fully secured their boat and their cooler. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna let you know you gotta honk. That's how drivers communicate. Well, truck stops, I stop, I get out of my car.
Oh,
I
God.
start picking up this cooler, my good deed for the day, and out of this clown car spills these 3. I was like, it would be you 3, wouldn't it? So what was it that you broke? Your bubbler?
The bubbler.
Yeah. So did you like kill your fish then?
We didn't catch it.
You didn't catch it? So, yeah, I always say, you see me in town, you better say hi. Well, these 3 definitely found a way to say hi. Okay, let's get to it. I'm gonna go fast. I am not gonna go back. You will have time to look at it on your own time. World War II at the home front. Now, ideally, I usually like to deliver this class after we've talked the whole war. It kind of ties it all together. Given today, I know I'm going to be cutting out. I'm giving you this up front. I think your brains have enough context to understand. Right? My world historians, we have already talked World War II. I think you got enough context to understand this. And as we step into the events of World War II the rest of this week, I may reference backwards. Hey, you remember when that happened? Hey, you remember what was going on at home? So World War II on the home front. The war may have been in Europe and in the Pacific, but there were also battles being fought at home as well. Not shooting battles, but they were still battles. 3 main categories: women, minorities, and industry. So battles that were being fought by these groups, or kind of revolution inside of industry, battles fought on the home front. Who are we looking at?
Rosie the Riveter.
Rosie the Riveter. Yes. How do you know that?
Because their paper says it.
Because paper says it.
She's everywhere.
She's everywhere. You want to know? You want me to drop a little known fact on you? This was not the more popular poster during World War II. This poster was actually in circulation for about 2 weeks, and then it fell off of the poster circuit. This poster got a resurgence in the 1980s with the new rise of the women's rights and feminism type movement. So yeah, this is super popular. It's been referenced by politicians. It's on T-shirts, etc. It does mean women's empowerment for sure. It got its start in the World War II era, but it was not super popular during World War II. I'm going to show you the poster that is more super popular in just a second. So under Rosie the Riveter, this is what I want you to write. She's a fictional character, but she was an inspirational recruiting.
Where is she at?
She is not any, it says Rosie the Riveter under women's role.
Yeah, if you
She is not any one
That
woman,
was a big
okay? She is not the face of any single specific woman. She's a fictional character, but she was used as a recruiting tool. She becomes this very iconic image of women in the workplace, doing traditionally male, quoting marks, male jobs, basically showing women can do those jobs. From this type of recruiting campaign, a lot of women joined the workforce, increased the number. 1940, there were 12 million women in the workforce. 1944, a short 4 years later, that's the whole span of the war, 20 million women in the workforce. That's an increase of 57%. That is pretty statistically significant. Now, I told you that this poster was not the more popular poster. This poster was seen as too aggressive. This poster was seen as, we can do it, and even to the point that we're going to take over your job, men. So this poster was seen as a little too aggressive. About a year later, another perspective on Rosie the Riveter comes out. Now, I am going to move on, so I'm going to freak out. You can get these notes on Google Classroom in just a second. This poster is what was more popular during World War II. What are some notable differences about this poster? She looks. Think this one's more fun?
She got a ham sandwich.
She's got a ham sandwich. Yeah. She's holding some heavy machinery. This poster was seen as a little less dominant, a little less confrontational for most men who were, who had given up their jobs in the workplace. She's a little less attractive. She's a little less sexy, but it was seen as a more fair representation of women in the workplace. One super interesting side fact, you probably can't tell from your seat, but what is her foot standing on top of?
A newspaper.
It's a publication of sorts.
It
It's a
says,
book. My up-fronters, can you read it?
No.
I can't read that on the.
It says Mein Kampf. What is Mein Kampf?
That's Hitler's thing.
Yeah, so she's stomping on Hitler's autobiography, Hitler's book called Mein Kampf, which my world historians might be able to remember that.
That's still Rosie.
It is Rosie the Riveter. This absolutely is Rosie the Riveter. This was painted by Norman Rockwell, super iconic painter, super iconic painting. We tend to know this picture more today because it regained popularity in the 80s, but this was the more popular poster during World War II. Now, a little bit more about Rosie as she goes. So, your notes say, how did women contribute? Here's some good language for you. They filled jobs that were traditionally held by men. It allowed men to go fight the war overseas. But let's not forget that women were also in uniform. Women also filled a variety of military roles. They were largely in all women's units. And there's a couple of named units. I'm not going to give you the acronyms. Don't need to clutter your brain. But women they filled roles in the military that were so-called women's jobs. At home, they went to the factories, took on male roles. In the military, they were typists, they were clerks, they were secretaries, they were nurses. Medical field jobs were very important. And if it was traditionally filled by a woman, like nursing, it was also a job for an Army nurse or an Air Force nurse as well. So this is how they contributed. And there is a lasting impact because when the men came home, guess what? The women had proved that they can work the factory job all the same. So there is a gender shift, a perspective shift on gender roles following World War II. I'm moving on. A couple more posters that kind of show how women fit into the workplace. Don't just kiss them goodbye, ladies. Work to bring them back. This was inspiring women to don't just sit at home, keep doing the dishes and raise the babies. Work to bring them back. We're all in this together. Here's another one. This one probably wouldn't fly today. Hey, good work, sister. We never figured you could do a man-sized job. That was seen as a compliment, but if you read that today, it's almost like it's a little bit of a cut, a little bit of a sideways, backhanded compliment. We never figured you could do a man-sized job. America's women have met the test. That is the important takeaway. Women stepped up to the plate. They showed what they could accomplish, and the workforce was forever changed because of it. All right, this is a real Rosie the Riveter in the workplace. I told you that the character is not based on a single real person, but this is a gal named Norma Jean. What does it look like she's working on? Airplane propellers, yes, some machinery. Now, she is traditionally attractive. She's clean. She's got her hair in her curls. She's not wearing the bandana per se. I think I got another picture of you. Okay, she's still, she was actually a part of a photo shoot for a magazine called Yank. And the photographer told her that she could probably be a model. What do you think?
Yep.
Yeah.
You think Norma Jean could be a model?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think Norma Jean could be a model because this is Marilyn Monroe. Whoa!
Are you kidding?
What? This is picture on the left is 19-year-old Marilyn Monroe. She was a Rosie the Riveter. Okay, she worked in the factories, and of course she goes on to become the iconic model Marilyn Monroe. Some of you having a real aha moment. Christy, good job.
I'm gonna be Marilyn Monroe.
Good job. So, yeah, I think Norma Jean probably has a future as a model. Here is a modern recreation, kind of a photo essay of Rosie the Riveters. I could share with you this link. I haven't posted it, but there's this photo essay. I can't remember the magazine, but it's really cool. It shows the red bandana, the work garments, but it shows modern day women, 2021, doing Rosie the Riveter type action. So it just goes to show you it's iconic. It's still relevant to the day. It's still a women's power, feminist movement type of icon, showing that women can meet the same demands or the same roles as men. All right, moving on. This is super important. Executive Order 9066. Some of you are going to feel the cringe at your country's history as I tell you about Executive Order 9066. It is not one of our happy moments. It is a wart in the story of U.S. history. It does not make me proud to be an American when I teach about Executive Order 9066. So the big takeaway is that this executive order from President Franklin Roosevelt leads to Japanese American internment camps. What is an internment camp?
I don't like a place to send people.
A place to send people, yeah. You come up with another word. Internment's kind of nice. Come up with another word. What do you think?
Concentration.
Concentration camp? Ooh, but isn't that where Hitler sent the Jews?
Yeah.
Wait a second. We sent Japanese to concentration
But
camps?
like we didn't.
We didn't gas them though.
Yeah, we didn't do all that.
Okay, there's a difference there. We didn't gas them. We didn't work them to death, right? In the same fashion. I think a better word might be detention camps or even prison camps, because in a lot of ways that is how they were treated. Order issued by President Roosevelt, February of 1942. Okay, let's see here. December, January, February. What is this coming on the heels of?
The Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor in December of 41. So we kind of have a national attitude of thinking that the Japanese might be the enemy, even Japanese Americans. This is the why. This is why this happened. Authorize the evacuation of all persons deemed a threat to national security from the West Coast to relocation centers further inland. I'll show you a map here in a second. But basically, the coast of California and about 50 miles inward, if you lived inside of that, you got moved to the heart of the country, the mainland of the country. Theoretically, moved away from the threat zone to the center of the country where they could keep an eye on you a little bit better. But wait a second. Who's the other enemy in World War II? Who's the other big enemy? Germany. How did this affect German Americans?
No, it did not.
Oh, it didn't. Yeah, you're right, it didn't. And then also with the Germans, a little less popular because they don't have a Hitler type figure, but Italy was also the enemy. How did this affect Italian Americans? Oh yeah, it did. It was just about the, Nixon went jumping. Just good. Just pick it up for me if you don't mind. This was pretty exclusively related to the stereotype and obviously the physical features that could be seen on a Japanese American. A little bit more for you. Authorize the Army to evacuate any persons considered to be a national threat to security. As a result, and as you follow these, the yellow language is what I think is key. Of course, you take notes the best way you see fit, but I think the yellow language is what you need to write down. Some of you are on the Chromebook, and I'm actually okay with that today because I know you're taking notes. As a result, over 120,000 Japanese people were forced to relocate to one of 10 different concentration camps, internment camps in the United States. I'm going to show you a map right here in just a second. And you're going to see that these internment camps were in the types of cities that you may go visit today for vacation. This was in the United States. No, not concentration camps. We can't quite use that word because there wasn't execution or labor. But it absolutely plucked them out of their homes, from their businesses, from their schools, from their lifestyle, and forced them to move. Most Japanese families were given between 4 days and 2 weeks to pack their bags and go, but some even shorter than that. Sometimes it was now, pack your bag and let's go. So mostly between 4 days and 2 weeks, which that's a short amount of time to have your life turned upside down. But some people, it was instant. A couple pictures coming along the way here. Well, first, here's the map. So look inside of that exclusion zone, okay, that gray shaded area. If you are of Japanese descent living there, California, New Arizona, Oregon, about half of Oregon and half of Washington. If you lived inside of that, you were rounded up and moved closer inland. And I want you to focus on the big triangles. Those are the relocation centers, the big triangles. So that's the West Coast. What is it closest to? Japan, right? It's closest to the island nation of Japan. And how have we already talked about Asian immigrants in the West Coast? So many of them came through Angel Island. And why did they come to the United States in the first place? Opportunities, but yeah, it's work on the Transcontinental Railroad. We're going to use them when we need to build something, but we're going to put them in camps when we're worried that they're a threat to our national security. This is why it's a scar, a wart in the story of American history. So a little bit more here. Ordered all foreigners of and Americans of Japanese descent. So not just like you're a Japanese national who's in the United States, but you're an American, first generation, second generation American, born here, of Japanese descent, to be confined in concentration camps for the purpose of national security. There is that word, ugly, ugly word. Cleared the way for the deportation of many Japanese Americans, made the west coast of the United States called a military zone, and it made all Japanese Americans enemies of the state. So how are we justifying this?
No, we made it military zone so we can.
Because we're at
War.
we're at war. Lincoln expanded his powers in a time of war. Wilson expanded his powers in a time of war. Here we have Roosevelt expanding his powers in a time of war. The things that we justify because we're at war, a lot of times don't look good 50 plus years later, as we studied in history. Picture there is one of the deportation or the internment camps. You can see that it's in a mountainous region, so it's not exactly on the west coast. The buildings look like barracks, probably real plain on the inside. Now, I've slept in many barracks. I've spent nights in the barracks. It's not that big of a deal to someone who chooses to be in the military. But if you had your whole life uprooted, bam, that's not exactly how you would want to live. What is a center in the photo? What's central in the photo?
Oh, the flag.
Because God bless America, you better still love that you're here, right? There was a lot of nationalism, nationalist ideals being preached inside of these camps. I don't know if you want to take it to brainwashing or re-educating, but there's a whole lot of God bless America happening inside of these camps, trying to ensure that these Japanese Americans weren't enemies. Okay, a couple of pictures here. This couple snips from an article I read one time. This shows life at home as a result of Executive Order 9066. So this fella here, obviously as Caucasian as they come, just as white as they come, right? Kent is a barber from Washington, and he opposes Japanese American. He opposes the return of Japanese Americans from their camps. So even when the war is over, Kent says we don't want any Japs back here ever. Now I just said a word that maybe didn't stick out to you, but it is. I will argue to you, and I'm not going to say it again. I really don't mean to. It is just as racially powerful as a lot of the other words that we get real bent out of shape about. Okay, other words that get people canceled or get leaked on TV. JAP. I know we say it sometimes, and we don't give it that same power. It is a racial slur, and it is just as powerful as any of the others that get leaked on TV. So, culturally speaking, today we kind of let that one go, whereas another word might get someone, fired or whatever. But that word is just as powerful as those words. So I'd encourage you, don't use that loosely. Don't just sling it around. It is a racial slur just as much as all the others. Picture just a little bit bigger there. Doesn't look like a kind fella. Looks like he'd run you off his lawn with a shotgun, I would say. Here's another one here. Keep moving. Jay, keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. Ooh, okay. Melting pot America, right? A sign erected in 1942 on a store owned by Japanese Americans, urging neighbors to see past the executive order, see past the hate. What's his sign say?
I am American.
Yeah, and he likely was born here in this store. This person was probably likely born here American, not brought here, but born here. But because of his Japanese descent, which can easily be seen in physical features, a little bit more easily than German or Italian, it was easy to target. This is a picture, this blows me away, and this gives me goosebumps when I think about the kindness of humans. This is a sign from a Japanese couple, husband and wife, who owned a store, and in their leaving, they left this sign on the front window so all their customers could see. Many thanks for your patronage. Hope to serve you in the near future. God be with you till we meet again. They got told to pack their bags and leave, and still they had that kindness in their hearts. So sometimes that good does come through. Picture showing soldiers forcing the relocation. Wasn't voluntary. Wasn't when you feel like it. It was a forced relocation on the spot. Do it now. Get on the train and go. Japanese family lugging whatever they could onto the train and being herded into these cars. Not unlike other images we see of other people groups being herded into cattle cars, being taken off to camps. So we give a whole lot of bad history to Hitler and his treatment of Jews in concentration camps. When in fact, how different are these images that come from our own country? right? One of those things that's got to hit you in the breadbasket and make you think that our American history story is not beautiful, or not all beautiful, because we have scars like this, we have warts like this. Again, just showing you that map, the exclusion area, the West Coast, and then the big triangles are where people were relocated. Yes, some of those are inside the inclusion zone, but they were still under lockdown. Some of them were much farther inland, and it shows that they got them all the way out of where they were from, all the way out of their homes. Plowing onward. Oh, already made the point, did not apply to Italian or German Americans. Executive Order 9066 was on the books all the way until 1976. President Gerald Ford officially rescinds the order in February of 1976. Taking a step further, in 1988, Congress finally passes a statement. Every now and then, it's not a law, but it's a statement, like officially on behalf of the Congress, where they say that a grave injustice had been done to Japanese Americans and citizens during World War II. So 1988, before there was ever a national apology. A woman holding a sign here says, "My father was born in America, but spent 4 years in a concentration camp." Just, I think it's easy to see what her message is. She's showing that it's not, America is not this melting pot of perfect justice and racial equality. Obviously, there's still warts, and we're working through them at this time period. I'm moving on. Erstwhile, amidst Executive Order 9066, what am I looking at? Japanese soldiers wearing what? An American Army uniform. Very similar. We watched the movie Glory. We saw all black regiment fighting in the Civil War. Japanese Americans served in all Japanese ethnicity units, like a non-segregated unit. They served in their own type of unit. And just like the 54th Massachusetts and other colored regiments, these guys served honorably. They're actually used in a positive way in the Pacific. A lot of times they were seen as undercover agents, or they could code break and translate in a way that a English-speaking white guy like me couldn't. So we locked up their families at home and still used them to our benefit in the military. Definitely a double-double, right? Definitely a double standard for our interactions with Japanese Americans.
They went all, and they should let their families free.
Christian says if they went and fought, then their family should be set free, because clearly they're demonstrating that they're not the enemy. Which I agree with that. That's not what happens. In fact, I can tell you a bunch of individual stories. There's examples of soldiers fighting overseas, returning from service. Maybe they were wounded. Maybe they just got discharged. Their time in the Army was up. Returning from the war and going into an internment camp. Because enemies, they're a possible enemy of America, right? So obviously a grave injustice overall. A couple more pictures here, colorized, really beautiful. I mean, he's carrying the American flag. He's not an enemy to America, but I bet his family was likely interred on the home front. Again, just more guys. They're just soldiers like the rest, but their families were obviously going through a big hardship at home. All right, so we're in the category of minorities. Remember, I did it was women, minorities, and then industry. You do have to flip to the back side for this one, because this is where I put this guy's picture. A. Philip Randolph. It's a fancy guy when he's got a first initial, right? A. Philip Randolph, a distinguished gentleman. Well, this is a picture of him. You can see that he is marching in protest at the Lincoln Memorial. Makes me think about something that's going to happen about 20 years into the future. What is that? Martin Luther King Jr. at the same Lincoln Memorial. So Martin Luther King Jr., we know that name, right? He's got a holiday. He's the one that saw the Civil Rights Act come to fruition, but he stands on the legacy of men like A. Philip Randolph. Not as famous, not as popular, doesn't have his own holiday, but he really paves the way for the civil rights movement of the 60s. So here's what you should write. He's a black man who worked to get the defense industry integrated so that black men could work in these jobs. Amidst needing workers in the factory, right? In fact, we're calling women into the factory to fill the role of men. We still have a situation where African Americans are not integrated in the workforce in the same way. They don't have the same opportunities as white men. Well, A. Philip Randolph works to make that a possibility. Hey, let us prove our worth. Let us prove ourselves. Let us go to the factories. We want to work on behalf of our country. He creates a group called the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters. not a super important vocab word, just throwing it out there, trying to bring about the change. Okay, so he is leading protests, much like Martin Luther King Jr. will in the future. He threatened a 1 million-man march on Washington, D.C. if President Roosevelt, FDR, would not meet with him. Threatened it. FDR did meet with him, and the march did not happen. Now, would Roosevelt have met with him if Randolph couldn't have produced 1 million men? I think it shows that he took Randolph seriously, right? If I tweet at the president, hey, President Biden, meet with me or else I'm going to have 1 million people march on Washington, D.C., I wouldn't take me seriously. And President Biden wouldn't take me seriously. I can't rally 1 million men. But FDR took him seriously because that's the type of influence he had. Okay, so he wasn't just a nobody clamoring. He was somebody that could rally 1 million people to march on Washington, D.C. Now, important to note, this march did not happen. I think it goes to show that conversation solves problems. FDR chose to meet with Philip Randolph. They talked. Philip Randolph does not have his 1 million-man demonstration. In fact, FDR issues an executive order to integrate the defense industry. He uses an executive order to intern Japanese Americans. That's negative. He uses an executive order to integrate the defense industry. That's positive. So without getting too much into a government class here, an executive order means ominous dominus, this is happening. Even though it didn't go through Congress, the president is making it happen. So he used executive orders for the negative with the Japanese and for the positive with integrating the defense force. So A. Philip Randolph does not have a 1 million-man march, but come 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. will have that 1 million-man march. And in fact, a lot of people connect the two events, right? They say that, or they recognize that A. Philip Randolph threatened a 1 million-man march. It didn't happen. Some change came about, but not that real long-lasting change, civil rights and reform. But 20 years later, Martin Luther King Jr. brings 1 million men to Washington, D.C. They have that 1 million-man march, and change comes from it. So we're connecting a whole lot of themes here. A. Philip Randolph, moving on. All right, a couple of quickies here. Wartime mobilization. The action of the country for preparing and organizing troops for active service. I think the definition's in the term. If you're getting mobile, tennis players, you ever get told to be mobile? Is that a word he uses? No. If you're being mobile, it means you're being active. But when we're going to go to war, we need to be active. Our country's got to get active. Our factories have to get active. Wartime mobilization is saying, hey, we've got to be in this together. We can't just sit back and do business as usual. We've got to get ready to go to war. In a time of war, and we've seen politicians reach out and express more power during a time of war, we created something called the War Production Board to oversee our national strategy on mobilization. Because we can't really just sit back and trust all the industries to get on the same page. The War Production Board said, hey, automobile industry, I need you to produce this. Clothing industry, I need you to produce this. Food industry, I need you to produce this. Here's some examples, and your notes call for examples. The draft and conscription, okay, it hasn't gone away, it's still there. We drafted people into service. Mandatory rationing, and I'm going to elaborate on that here in just a second. And mandatory wartime conversion, elaborate on that here in just a second as well. So write down your examples, and I'm going to elaborate on each pretty rapidly. Rationing. If you are going to go on a hike, you know you're going on a 10-mile hike. Raise your hand if I already lost you, because you're never going to go on a 10-mile hike. If you're going on a 10-mile hike with a 20-ounce bottle of water, are you going to drink it all in your first mile?
Oh, yes.
You're not. You're not. Now, I don't know why you're going on a hike with only a 20-ounce bottle of water, but you're not going to drink it all in your first mile. You're going to sparse it, or you're going to parcel it out through the next 10 miles. I'm really trying hard not to say the word. What are you doing? Rationing. Rationing, right? You're going to ration it out. That's the only common sense word to use. You're going to ration it out over 10 miles. Same thing. This is what rationing is. We only have so much fuel in the country. You got to ration it out. We only have so much copper in the country. You got to ration it out. We only have so much food in the country. We got to ration it out. Now, there's a variety of posters that describe this, morale posters or motivational posters, public service announcement posters that describe this. There are two kinds of rationing, voluntary and mandatory. Voluntary means you choose to do it. Mandatory means it is imposed on you by the country. So we're going to look at these posters and try to think, does it represent voluntary rationing or mandatory rationing? Do less so they'll have enough. Rationing gives you your fair share. That's just kind of the intro. All right, a war ration book. This is tickets for, so that's wheat. The blue picture there, that's wheat. And the top picture there, it's a torch, but it represents fuel. So it's a war ration book for wheat and for fuel. Is this voluntary rationing or mandatory rationing? I got a vote for mandatory. Got another vote for mandatory? You think this is voluntary? How is this voluntary? Oh, okay. Reasonably, you could not use your whole coupon book. I'll hear that. Chelsea, why do you think it's mandatory? Okay. So she says it looks real official. I'll help you out. It's mandatory. This is how much food and fuel a person could have for a month. Not more. Now, theoretically, I suppose you could use less. You could not use your whole book, your ticket book. But this is how much food and fuel a family got for a month. You'll take that road trip to Disney World if you got enough fuel. You're going to go visit grandma across the country if you have enough fuel. You're going to throw a party on Wednesday night with your youth group if you got enough tickets. Mandatory rationing. The government told you how much food and fuel you could have. Tin salvage station for empty collapsible metal tubes. I need the tin in your empty toothpaste and shave cream tubes. Bring them in. War production board at the bottom there. Mandatory or voluntary? Mandatory? Voluntary. Why voluntary?
You don't always like to bring stuff if you have it.
You don't all. It is voluntary, and it is trying to encourage you to do that. And Christy said it well. You don't really have to. You don't necessarily have to. They're trying to inspire you to. Okay, Uncle Sam's trying to give you the good word there. This is an example of voluntary rationing. If you're a good person, you will. Okay, so maybe you're feeling it in your heart a little bit. But, if you're lazy and you throw that tin out, it's going to end up in the garbage and no one's really going to know. They're not coming for you. Plant a victory garden. Our food is fighting. A garden will make your rations go further. So first, let me describe what is a victory garden. Major idea inside of World War II on the home front was that people would plant and consume their own food. V for victory, right? What did we want to accomplish? Victory. Excuse me, I just got tickled in my throat. This is saying even if you're not in uniform, even if you're not fighting overseas, you can still participate in the war effort by planting your own garden. However, do you have to? Do you have to? No, you don't. So is it mandatory or voluntary?
Voluntary.
Voluntary. And what a lot of these posters were trying to do was inspire you to participate. So this is voluntary. Same thing here, Victory Garden, voluntary. This is showing that your turnips and your carrots can actually be ammunition. If you will participate in Victory Gardens, your turnips and your carrots are ammunition. Don't waste bread, same thing. Save your slices, defeat the Germans. Rationing means a fair share for us all. A lot of these were trying to tug on your heartstrings. They're trying to make you feel like you were not a part of the team if you failed to ration. You're a bad American if you fail to ration. Also, you're hurting our boys overseas if you don't participate in these programs. Grandma's in this fight too. She's going to turn down the thermostat a little bit. And the little bit that she turns down the thermostat in Wisconsin, what is she saving? Good. Energy, gas. Where's that gas and oil going to go? Overseas. Now, is one grandma turning down the thermostat really going to send a barrel of oil overseas? Say it again. Yeah, well, if every grandma does it, if 1,000 grandmas do it, yes. So a lot of people sometimes write this off with, just one person doesn't make a difference. Well, if everybody has that attitude, you're right. But if everybody has the other attitude, like let's do this, let's get on board, then that's how rationing works. So, okay, moving on now, wartime conversion. This is one of your vocabs. When a factory changes what it's producing during wartime to support the war effort. Henry Ford factories is a great example. Ford, of course, is producing cars, and we are going to talk about Henry Ford in the future. I got a full-on demonstration, and I just haven't fit it in yet. But I think you guys common sense know Henry Ford produces cars. Well, during the war, Henry Ford produces tanks. Ford factories produce military vehicles. Did they choose to? A little bit of 50-50, right? The War Conversion Board told them to. Okay, they were mandated, we need you to produce military vehicles. But they were patriotic Americans who wanted to help, and they also got compensated for it. Okay, they're not making free vehicles. They're producing vehicles that still help the war effort. Examples, a ribbon factory begins to make parachutes, cloth and silk. Well, we don't need ribbons as much as we need parachutes. Ford began making tanks, and the picture is actually of Ford Motor Factory. And a typewriting factory began making machine guns. Metal and all the machinery that was already there. They went from making typewriters to making machine guns. Assembly line photo here. So we got a lot going on. We see women in the workplace. We see war goods being made on the assembly line, wartime conversion. That's a blow up of the Ford Motor Factory making tanks. And then I really love this one. What does this workplace sign say? The guy who relaxes is helping the Axis. It rhymes. Who's the Axis? Hitler, Italy, the bad guys. So it's saying if you slack off for even a second, you might be the enemy. Now they weren't arresting people, but the guy who relaxes is helping the Axis. So that amuses me every time I see it. All right, that was a blitz. That was fast. I need to get on the road. I got to get to my testing center. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn on one video. It's a quickie, right? 3 minutes. And then I'm going to loose you to your own devices. What you have to accomplish is read and respond. You have to get to choosing an article and reflecting on it. And should you have any gaps in your notes, well, you got time to get after that as well. I am going to beg you to not mess this up, but I invite you to cut the cake and share amongst yourselves. I got forks, I got a knife, a cake knife, and I will show you Kelly McGuire's creation. I already showed you the big one, but this is Kelly's smaller cake creation. So a couple of y'all that can nice and organizedly cut the cake. Please, I'm looking at a couple of the, teen moms in the room. Right here. Plates. I'll let you play the video. All right. So amidst that, let's go to the bathroom first. When you come back, respect Mr. Taylor as leader of the classroom. It's a long way. I love you. I mean it. I'll see you tomorrow. Long way. Hope I pass my test. You know what? Go the long way. Go the long way. I passed my test that I have to make. Eddie, I'm gonna pull this video up.
I'm set to be ready. So I'm gonna get back and split out, watch the video while they eat.
I'll log in from campus, but it kind of logs out every now and then. I still have my password.
Yeah.
I'll text you.
Have you done down there?
I'll do it.
You do that, 'cause I can do 4 on mine, and then that way if it longs out.
What day we rather keep it?
It was any time from around the time like 8 to 12. I was not there.
Thursday?
Yeah, there are those.
Still on? I thought you got it already.
Whoa.
I said.
I want the crunches. I want them.
We're a little cake.
Not wearing them.
If you don't get them,
That's what I'm saying.
I'll get it.
I don't share.
Let me get them.
I don't think that's enough cake for all of us.
It'll work. I mean, it will.
I don't even eat cake to begin
Sure,
with.
Darren.
It's fine.
Sure.
There's no way I'm
I want
gonna
the
get enough
crunches.
cake.
Now, let's give me one.
I think hey yo, I'm done.
Hey, yo.
Slot dance.
Yeah.
The kind you eat.
Hey, guess what?
It's really thick
Just say
frosting.
the word.
Like when you cut into it, it's really thick frosting.
There you
I've done
go.
all my work.
I'm sorry.
You have to, because you have to get the point.
I had
So.